Hi everybody, Paul Gallagher. What I would like to discuss today is the radial filter. Now where do you find it? Straight at the top left hand side here, this is an Adobe Camera Raw, it's the radial filter there, okay. And what it does is it puts an oval shape or a circular shape on your image, and you can alter tones, colours within or outside that particular shape. That's all it does. We'll notice that when we've activated it, this panel here on the right hand side is virtually the same as the basics panel with all the same candidates. So you've got temperature, tint, exposure, blacks, whites, texture, a big range of things, but there's a number of other things that we're going to be exploring down that panel in a minute. Just to draw a shape, by the way, you can draw circles. If you hold the shift key, you can draw a perfect circle in the image itself, okay? When you let go of the shift key, you'll notice that there's little function buttons or little anchor points in the circle. There's 4 of them. There's 2 on the outsides and there's 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. And when the radial filter is active, you've got a little green circle in the middle. So I can left click on one of these and it makes it longer and thinner. Okay, at the bottom, at the sides, left click and drag outwards, it makes it wider or skinnier. Okay. Also want to go in the middle of the actual radial filter itself. You'll see that what happens is it turns into a cross, the cursor turns into a cross, and I can move this around quite easily to position it in my image. And then I'll move it upwards and to the side. Okay, so we can position our radial filter however we want. Now, the other important thing with this filter is whether we want the effect to be on the outside of the elliptical shape or in the inside, okay? And where we find that or position that is down here. It's the very, very bottom. You've got outside or inside, okay? Now, it's currently set to inside, okay? Now, if you want to see what it looks like, the area it's going to be affected, if you come to the very bottom down here and click on mask there, okay? Now what you can see is the center of the radial filter has gone red. That's indicating that whatever adjustments we do over here is going to affect the center of the radial filter. If we come back over to the effect here and we elect for the effect to take place on the outside, you can see that the outside of the radial filter has gone red. Okay, now the other thing you will know is that the bit that's poking out of the filter, i.e. the sheets of ice there, this is Iceland in the winter by the way, that there basically you've got this sort of feather effect at the edge, and this is quite important with this particular filter, and the feather is just above where you set the effect. So the greater the feather, the more the effect is going to kind of creep into the middle of the image. The less the feather, the more obvious the oval shape will be in the image. So that's going to look pretty awful and pretty obvious what you've done. So you've got to be quite careful with your feather, but you don't have to commit to it all here just now. Get a rough idea what you want. Say we want to put a bit of a vignette on the edge of this image. Get a rough idea where you want it to be. I'll just kind of stretch this up a little bit and maybe a little bit wider at the edges. Okay, so we can see the effect it's going to have there. Okay, now what I want to do is adjust the image without looking at all these sort of dots and everything and mask all over the image. I want to get rid of the mask, so I'll click on that. That's quite obvious. And then to the left of that is overlay. And when I get rid of that, it loses the shape of the radial filter. And I find this is the best way of working, because when I make the adjustments now to the image, I'm not going to be distracted by looking at the shape of the radial filter. I just want to see how it will affect the photograph. So what I'm going to come up to exposure here, and I'll just creep back a little bit and push the exposure to the left. Now, as we can see now, we can still adjust the feather. We can make the feather bigger, okay, and you can see that the gap in the center contracting. And when I make the feather smaller, it's going to become more apparent. So it's with a kind of a vignette like this, the juggle is between the feather, okay, I'm going to move it across, and the amount you've darkened the edges down. Never make a vignette too obvious. Okay, but round about there. Now, if I come down to the very bottom, it's like 4 boxes, and one there that looks like sliders. When I switch that on and off, we can see that's the vignette created. But it can do more than just create vignettes. You can do lots of different adjustments with it. But first, I want to go back and just get rid of this vignette that I put on the image. So I'm going to click on overlay there. Now you'll notice that our radial filter hasn't reappeared. It's placed a dot in the middle. And you can see if we hover over the dot, it's telling us where the radial filter was and where the feather was, i.e. the mask. But how did, say I wanted to get rid of that, how would I do it? Well, all I need to do is just click in the center and basically the grey dot goes red. That means it's reactivated. And now I can alter these sliders to whatever extent I want. But if I want to get rid of it and you don't like the look, or you think no, it looks wrong, or you've pushed it too far, just hit your delete button and you'll get rid of the radial filter. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm going to reset local correction settings there. What I want to do is show you how you can use it on the inside, but in a slightly different way. I'm going to come down to the effect here and click on inside. Okay. And I'm looking at the sky. I want to alter the sky, and in particular the clouds in the sky. So I'm just going to do what I did before. I'm just going to position it, drag this down a little bit, maybe it's slightly wider, okay, and position it so it's going to run off the edge of the canvas here, but the effect is going to be round here. And in fact, the heart of the image, or the heart of the selection made by the radial filter, is covering all of the cloud, which is what I want to adjust. Okay, now how am I going to do this? First and foremost, I've got to make the effect on the inside, because it's the clouds are inside the radial filter. Now, if I'm to adjust anything here, really, I'm going to have to be quite careful, because I want the clouds to be brighter, but I don't want to blow the highlights in the sky. It's just the clouds I want to affect. Now, you could do this with an adjustment brush, but we can still do it with a radial filter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to range mask here. Okay, I'm going to click on none and go to color. And what this gives us now is a color picker here. Okay, we can see our color picker just there. And I'm going to click on the bright clouds here. Okay, and I'm going to hit the shift key and make sure we get these clouds as well. So it's them two colors there in that part of the radial filter that I want to just brighten up a little bit, but leave this sky alone so it doesn't blow. So if I come up now to exposure, click on that and drag it across, we can see that we can very gradually just give a little bit of a lift to the clouds there in the image. If we come down once again to the sliders here and click that off and on, we can see we've just accentuated that effect of the sunlight coming across there. Okay, now lastly, we can also use color. So I'm going to reset local correction settings here, and I'm going to make a big radial filter and position it over the base of the image. Okay, a big radial filter, and bring it down here. Okay, and position it, drag it down. So it's just covering most of the ice at the base of the image. Now I always thought that this ice was a little bit too purpley for my liking. Now we can alter temperature, but we can actually also use color. So what I'm going to do is over here, it says at the base here, it says color. If I click on that, then we get a color picker box that I can use. And I'm thinking I'd like these here, these colors here, to be a little bit cooler blue. So I'm going to kind of guess around here. And we can see that what we've got is, we've just got the foreground going a slightly cooler blue to what it was before. Okay, we can see. You can select any colour you want, you can make it look absolutely horrible, but for here, just the cooler there. It's ever so slightly cooler than what it was before. It was a bit too orangey and a bit too magenta. Go OK. Now we've committed to it. And now we can switch this on and off, and we can see the effect we've had on the sky and the foreground colour. So it can be a quite powerful tool, but just as with any of these things, it's just a little bit of trial and error, experimentation. And don't worry if you get it wrong, it doesn't really matter, because you can just go back to the start point and have another go. So you've got the radial filters to do a vignette, you can use colour, and you can also apply colour over the image itself. Go try, enjoy, and I'll speak to you again soon.